Functions. A function is like a machine for numbers. You put a number in, the machine does its work, and out pops another number. So you have an input and an output. And so far, this sounds just like a relation. But functions are a special type of relation, one where there is only one output for every input. So how can you tell if something's a function or not? Well, no two ordered pairs are going to have the same input component. So let's take a look at an example here. So we have a table of values. We see a bunch of inputs and an outputs, and this is a function because all of these inputs are unique. However, if we look at another table of values, we have a bunch of inputs, a bunch of outputs, but the inputs here are repeated. So you have 1 has an output of 2, but 1 also has an output of 4. So that is not a function because there should only be one output for every input. Let's flesh this out a little bit. So, how can you tell if you have a function? For ordered pairs, table of values, and arrow diagrams, look at every input and make sure it has only one output. And note, for a function, inputs cannot be repeated, but outputs can. Let's take a look at example 1. If you take a look at all the inputs, 1, 0, 3, -3, and 5, they're all unique. They're never repeated. Therefore, that's a function. For example 2, the arrow diagram, notice that for input 2, it has two different outputs. It has -2 and 3. For a function, you can only have one output per input. Therefore, that's not a function, it is a relation. And for example 3, all those inputs there on the table are unique, never repeated. Therefore, that is a function. Now let's look at graphs. How can you tell if a graph is a function or not? What we do is we do what's called a vertical line test, VLT. And we would just draw vertical lines throughout the graph. If the vertical lines touch the graph in only one place, then it's a function. Because that means for every input, there's only one output. If the vertical line touches the graph in 2 or more places, that's a relation. It's not a function because that means you have 2 outputs for 1 or more inputs. So let's take a look at the graph on the left. We'll draw vertical lines throughout, so lines straight up and down. And you'll notice the red line there. For that red line, it hits the graph in 2 places. If it hits it in 2 places, that means it fails the vertical line test. Therefore, it's not a function, it's a relation. The graph on the right, draw a bunch of vertical lines throughout, straight up and down. And there's nowhere on those vertical lines that the graph hits more than one time. The graph only hits one time only. Therefore, this passes the vertical line test. It is a function. So let's look at a few more examples. Determine, using that vertical line test, whether the following are functions or relations. While you're at it, try to determine the domain and range as well. Okay, so for the graph on the left, if we did a bunch of vertical lines throughout this graph, those vertical lines would hit the graph only one time. It passes the VLT, it is a function. However, for the circle on the right, draw a vertical line anywhere there, and you'll see on that vertical line, you will touch the graph twice. Therefore, it fails the vertical line test. Therefore, it is a function. I won't explain the domain and range for each. I'll show you the answers. If you're not getting these right, please come to the online tutorials on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock, and I can help you out then. Okay, for these two examples, graph on the left, Again, with a bunch of vertical lines, those vertical lines would hit the graph only once. So that passes the VLT. It's a function. For the graph on the right, draw a vertical line anywhere, and you will hit the graph twice. So you failed the vertical line test, therefore it's a relation. As far as domain and range, there they are. Okay, last couple of examples. Graph on the left. There's several places where it would fail the vertical line test. That's an example of one. On that red vertical line, you'll see that it'll hit the graph in 1, 2, 3 spots. Therefore, it fails the vertical line test. That's a relation. And for the graph on the right, there's no vertical line you can draw that would hit the graph more than one time. It passes the VLT, therefore it's a function. And your domain and ranges are below. Okay, again, if you're having trouble with the domain and range, please come see me at the online tutorials or send me an email and ask me a question and I'll try to help. Thanks.